This tutorial is going to cover some color correction and lighting techniques that I use in Photoshop to sort of add those finishing touches to a project. So here is a series design that I'm working on with a church that we've kind of wrapped up, but this is sort of the flat version. So if you can see, this was rendered out of Cinema 4D, so these are 3D models inside of sort of an infinity wall with some basic studio lighting. And I can go in, and if I turn off the text, you can see that this is oh, wrong one. Let's see. You can see that, here we go. This is the flat render out of Cinema 4D. So, while it looks cool, and then you can add some text to add, a little bit more interest to it, then that's great. But we really need to add some more color correction to make it feel just a bit more moody. So I'm going to walk through what I did to add the color. Now I'll show you the final really quickly to give you an idea of what the final will look like. Turn these back on here. Okay, so this again was the flat out of Cinema 4D, and then this was the final here. So there's a lot more color and contrast in these chairs. There's some blue hint throughout the entire thing, a little bit of vignetting. Added a bunch of little texture or text boxes and things that are here, some red little pencil lines and stuff. So to me that makes it just look a lot more interesting than this. So I'm going to go through what I did. Alright, so for this one I'm going to turn off some things here, and we'll sort of start from scratch. So I'm going to turn off the title as well. So I use adjustment layers a lot, so that's where really we're going to start. And you can find your adjustment layers panel up here in Windows and adjustments right there. So once you get that, you should have all these little options right here. The ones I use the most would be selective color, levels, curves, sometimes some hue and saturation, contrast. We're going to go through a couple of those. So let's see, I'll start with the chairs. Yeah, we'll start with the chairs first. So I wanted to get a little bit more, turn these off, I wanted to get a little bit more punch out of these chairs. So when I added a levels to it, it added a nice little, they look much more vibrant and interesting. But I didn't want this to affect the entire thing, so what I did was I did a clipping mask on these chairs, and you can see that right here. So if I just delete this for now, and so I don't want that for the entire project, so I just needed to add it to the chairs. So what I did is I added a clipping mask. So I went down here to this little button right there for clipping mask. I held down Option and I clicked it, and it makes it all black. So then I can go and draw, kind of paint in where I want to affect the red on the chairs. So with that layer selected, I hit B on the keyboard for my brush tool. I made sure that my color was white. So you're drawing a white layer on top of this black, and so whatever is white is going to reveal that layer, and whatever is black will hide it. So now if I take my brush tool and I paint here, you can see now I have this nice vibrant color coming through. But again, I just wanted the chairs, so I took a nice sort of soft brush, not super soft, but just a little bit around the edges, and then I just started drawing sort of a mask around these. Now holding down Shift, if I click here, if you have some nice straight lines, this will save some time. I'd click my brush, I'd go down here, I'd hold down Shift, and I'd click again, and it makes a nice straight line. So that would save me some time. So again, I would go around and draw this mask, and then color all this in with that white. So I'm just going to undo it a few times to get back to where I left off. And so once you're done, you should end up with this right there. So I have just the chairs kind of painted on there. So that gives these nice vibrant colors to those chairs. Then I would add an overall levels. And again, well, let me explain a little bit about the levels. So to see this, I need to go to this little panel right here, the properties of levels. And when you start, it looks just kind of like this, like it's stretching out across your blacks and your whites. So I would just start pulling in some color to get the color that I was looking for. And just by adjusting these three little panels, I would go for a certain vibrantness of that. I don't even think that's a word, but let me undo it a few times, get back to where it was, something like that. Then I added another levels on top of that for the background. Again, just made that a little bit brighter. You can see I pulled in, I think it was probably like this, and I just pulled in just a little bit, and then I had selective color. So I'm going to turn this on, and you can see that adds a ton. So in here, I usually spend most of my time within the whites, neutrals, and blacks. So if I go to whites, you can see I've adjusted those blacks just a little bit. So at 0, it looks, you know, sort of like that, but I think I pulled those in just to make it a little bit brighter. The neutrals, let's see, really bumped up the blues there. So you can see if it's 0, you can see the difference that it makes. So it adds a really nice tone to it. Just the yellows, I think I took some of the yellows out so it was less like this, and I think it was a -9. So again, just trying to create sort of a cooler vibe. Bump down those blacks a little bit there, and then in the blacks you can see that it will really just adjust the blacks in your picture. So if I were to bump up this yellow, let's see, you can see this really just affecting those black colors. Get it back to where it was here. There we go. So again, playing around with those adds a ton to a photo. All right, the next thing I would do, so those were really just my main adjustment layers, and then I had this color overlays folder, and inside of here I have a bunch of different glows going on. So here, let's see, it's just kind of a blue hint. This is probably my main vignette around the whole thing. So if I zoom out, it's a little bit easier to see when I turn them on and off. Let's see here, another blue kind of hint color, and I'll go through these in just a second here. So I'm just going to turn some. So some of these are kind of an orange, yellowy vibe. There's my main vignette right there, and then this blue glow from the top. So if I had all these off, let's just start from the beginning. So make a new layer, and I'm just going to take a really big brush, super soft, something like that, and then I would pick sort of a light blue, maybe somewhere around there, and I would take my brush way up here to the top and just click it once, and I get this big blue glow. And then I would do a few different blending modes within that layer. So with that layer selected, I'm holding down shift and doing plus and minus. I think you have to select a different tool or something to get this to work right. We'll get there, hang on. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Oh, I think I selected it on the opacity setting or something. Alright, so now I can start flipping through these. So I kind of just go through until I figure out what really works. Usually it's screen, I think, or lighten. So it just adds very little, excuse me, very little to that, like it's a glow from a light. So I might do that a couple times there. Maybe darken up. Let's see what this does. So this was my main vignette. So to do a vignette for me, usually I'd just do a new layer. I zoom pretty far out. Hit B on the keyboard. I got a nice big brush. Then I can do a pretty dark color. Maybe I want to lean just towards that blue hint. And then I sort of just kind of paint in my edges. So, you know, sort of get those corners. You don't want to go too crazy with it. So something kind of like that, maybe. That gives a nice little vignette. And then you can, you know, you can do some blending modes on that if you want. Oops, did it again. We'll get there. There we go. Do some different blending modes to see what works and what doesn't. That kind of does some nice contrast there. Then you can turn that down if you don't want it too strong. All right. Excuse me. Fighting a cold. We have some orange glows in here just to add a little bit more color. Again, that's the same technique really, by making a new layer, taking my big brush here, doing maybe an orange, light orange, peachy looking color. Again, I have a really big brush. Whoops, a little bit too big. And then just kind of clicking to the side and get a nice little glow. I sound like Bob Ross. Flipping through some of these to see what works and what doesn't. So overlays, sort of nice. Dial that back a bit. It's very subtle. Not a whole lot to it. So anyways, that's really kind of the technique I would use. There's a really big blue glow there that has a lighten on it with a 32% opacity. Even darken some of these corners over here, some more vignette stuff there. So really just playing with those levels and layers to and colors to get a really cool look. So then the next thing I did was with the text. And as far as lighting and color goes, that's really what I do a lot, and it depends on the picture, but maybe that'll help. I'll go through a little bit more with a random picture from the internet, and we'll mess with it some more. So then for the next thing I did was with these text lines, I wanted to feel like they were kind of floating pieces of text floating all around. And I'll have to show you guys the bumper later on, but it looks pretty cool with these animated chairs. But I would make a text box. Let's see if I can just click in here. Whoops. Floating scriptures. Where is this? Let me highlight some of that, copy that. So for that, I would make a box of text, paste in some scripture there, something like that. Probably turn my opacity way down. So I'd have maybe some in focus and some not in focus. I'd duplicate that, slide it over. Then I can blur this. I could go to filter, blur, gaussian blur, and it's going to ask you to convert to a smart object, which is fine. You can always edit it within the smart object. And so you can see that it's added some blur there. I could turn that down. And so that feels like it's you know, closer to the lens or too far away or something to give you a little more depth. And with these pencil lines, I've gone through it in a tutorial before, but what I did was make a new layer, and I hit B on the keyboard, get a nice brush. I want a super small brush with most of the hardness on there. Turn that way down. Pick kind of a reddish color. Okay, so when you draw a line, I'm just clicking and I'm holding down Shift to get a nice straight line. That's pretty boring. So what I would do is go to the brush settings right there and change some of these things around. So I could turn on the shape dynamics, scattering, and then bump this up a little bit. Probably make it a lot thinner. Let's see, maybe like 3. Scattering you can, you know, move around if you want. Trying to make it look more like a pencil vibe, something like that. And then I would just click and draw. So you can see there it's much more like a pencil. Then I may erase some of that a little bit. Get my eraser tool, and this is just a brush on that eraser, like a dirty, grungy little brush, and then kind of click randomly to get some inconsistencies there in the brush. So yeah, then I'll put these in different places, and that was kind of the whole project. So let's start excuse me, let's start from a random picture. So I have a picture over here from Pexels that I'm downloading really quickly, and I'm going to drag it into Photoshop. So it's just a picture of a Bible, pretty standard looking photo. So, you know, you may, without really knowing what to do, you may just say, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to add some text to it, and this is going to be called, you know, the Book of Psalms or something, and make that white. And this may be, you know, you feel like this is the only thing you know how to do to make this a series, but you know, there's probably so much more you can do to it. I don't think I spelled that right. Is that right? S-P-S-A-L-M. That's right. So you know, you're like, okay, so here's my series. I got a Bible, I got the words in there, so I'm good to go. But maybe there's something cooler we can do to this. So first, I would start with making some color correction to this. With my layer selected, I guess I can put it at the very top. We'll start with some selective colors. I'm going to click on that. This has a lot of blacks in it, so we'll start with the blacks. I can sort of adjust these here. You can see how it's affecting those black levels in this project. I love some nice blue glow in there. Maybe pull some of those colors out a little bit. So we'll start with there. We'll go to neutrals, and we can adjust. And the neutrals are gonna, you know, change those pages a lot. Excuse me. Just go with what feels right. Just sliding them back and forth to figure out what feels right. You can spend a ton of time on this getting it just right, but this at least gives you an idea of what these things do. Let's mess with levels. Let's see what levels do. So that's a little bit too bright there. So anyways, we'll start with there. And these, if you just wanted it to affect that one layer and not the text, you would put this right on top of that book layer, right click it and do clipping mask, create clipping mask, adds this little arrow saying I'm just gonna mess with this layer right here. And that goes for all of these. As long as they're kind of stacked on top of each other, they'll just affect the layer right under it. So then what could we do? We could add maybe some it's very clean, so maybe we could add a little bit of particles or some noise. I love doing some noise, so I would make a new layer, and I would draw a black box here. Just grabbing my rectangle tool and a dark color. Oops. I'm gonna draw just a box on top of that. Pretty basic, just a dark gray box. And I'm gonna go to filter. I'm gonna go to noise, add noise. We can rasterize that, that's fine. And now you can see it's added this noise on top of there. A few different options here. I'm gonna keep the one with color. Maybe dial it back a little bit. Something like that. Hit OK. And we can then just do a blending mode on top of that. Somewhere along the lines of lighten screen. So you can see it adds a little bit of noise. Again, there's not a whole lot to it, and it's the subtle things that make the difference. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, the opacity right there. Okay. We could add some particles to it. Let's see what I'm doing all this through Pexels, so all these images are free, and let's see what else can come up. So let's type in dust and see what happens. So here's a good example of what we could do and be a little creative. Let's see. Let's try this one. Let's click on this. This may be a bit too angelic, but we'll give it a try. Downloaded that. I'll throw this in here. So my thought is maybe this could be radiating from the book. So I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to drag it to where these pages are. Maybe they're kind of coming out like that. Hit OK. This might not quite work because these pieces of grass are a bit strong. Maybe we could add a big blur to that. Do another blur. Let's see. Let's do some blending modes on that. This at least lets me know this is going to work or it won't. So that kind of works. It's pretty interesting options there. Blending modes are your friend. I usually go through them a few times before something clicks. So we'll start here. I'm going to turn that way down. Not way down, but a decent amount. Then I'm going to add a clipping mask to that. So I'm going to add the little box here. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to not hold down Option. I'm going to click on it. It's going to make a white box. But if I wanted to hold down Option and click on it, it makes a black box. Then I can start painting that in. But I'm going to do the opposite. That way I can see what I'm painting out. So with that little box selected, I'm going to hit B on the keyboard for my brush tool. Bump that up a good bit. A lot of softness on that. And make sure my color is white. Then I can start painting this. Oh, sorry. No, make sure it's black. And start kind of painting this out. Do a really big brush. Don't really want it down here at all. All right, so we got some grass in here, which is a little weird. Not really going to do us much good. And if you want to, brush these out, but maybe not all the way, you can drop the opacity of that brush up here, and maybe try to paint some of these grassy layers out to where it's not quite, so you can't quite tell what it is, something like that. Not the best work, but you get the picture. Another thing we could do is maybe flip this around. Let's see. Command T. I'm gonna flip it around. It could maybe coming out of this light here, which is also an option. You can scale that up a good bit, and we can again adjust our clipping mask and dirty those up a little bit. So some options there. Let's see what else we can find. So like this guy with this dust layer, this could be helpful. Let's see if it's gonna let me download it. There we go. Download, throw this in there. So we got these cool dust layers. So I'm going to paint him out again with a clipping mask, and I want to do a clipping mask so that I can still scale it up and scale it down. I could rasterize it and erase it, but then once I do that, if I scale it down and lock that in, then and I try to scale it back up, it's going to be all pixelated. So that's why I like to use clipping mask. And I'm going to hit B on the keyboard. It's black, which is good. Then I'm going to dust him out. I'm just going to get rid of him pretty much as much as I can here. There we go. Soften up these edges as well. Okay. And let's just see what happens. I'll move this over a bit. Maybe I want this to be sort of in my light. Okay. And we'll flip through some blending modes on that. So there we go. That's looking kind of cool. Color dodge. I think color dodge was probably my coolest looking one. That one's not too bad. Screen, color dodge. So that looks pretty cool. I'm going to turn that down some. And then you can take that and just duplicate it a few times. So I can stick that maybe right here. Duplicate that. Slide it up here, maybe rotate it so it's not quite so that you don't quite see the pattern that's coming along with that. Move it up some more, rotate that some more. Then you can even just adjust that layer a bit there. Okay, so that looks pretty cool. We could take this same layer and maybe throw it. Oops, don't want to do that. Again, I'm just clicking on that layer, hitting Command J to duplicate it. I can move this around, so you can see this adds a really cool look within that in that kind of dark area. So you could do a ton to this photo to add some nice effects to it. Let's see. What else could we do here? Excuse me. Let's type in. Let's just type in texture and see what comes up. Usually, you just kind of start looking to see what clicks and what might work well with this photo. I wouldn't want to add anything really like a wood. That's kind of weird. Paper could work. This is kind of cool. Let's see what this may do here. I'm gonna throw this in there. Oops. Now this would have to be really toned down, but let's just see what happens. First I'm going to flip through my blending modes. And again, it would have to be really toned down. So let's go something color dodge again. This is probably like 5%, like really toned down. It's okay. It's not great. It's a little bit of a cheap move. Let's see what else comes up. So texture. Let's see. These sparks are kind of interesting. Some bokeh particle type things could work. For instance, this right here, you probably would scroll past this because it's so bright and pink and a bit too much, but let's play with it and see. So I could throw this in here, and then I could do a hue and saturation adjustment on that and do a clipping mask for just that layer, and then maybe bump my saturation down, change the hue a little bit, so now I have this kind of, you know, a brand new looking texture. Let's do some blending modes on that, see what comes up. Okay, so that's all kind of cool. It's pretty interesting looking. You could even scale it down, you know, to where it feels like this book is sort of magical, you know. Then paint some of that out, turn it way down. I don't know, tons of stuff you could do. Maybe we'll just bump it up here, turn it way down. Just adds a little bit of interest along that. So you know, just playing around with it. If there's anything else we could do before I call it good. If anything else jumps out. The trick is to not go crazy, not overdo it, but just adding a few things can make a big difference. This is kind of cool. I wonder if we could do something with this writing. So, you know, another option would be to do what we did on the last one with the text lines. You could do, you know, grab some, oops, well, there's some text layer. Let me just move that up for example's sake. Throw that up here. You know, you can start adding in a bunch of text lines and, you know, random pieces, and then blur those up. Gaussian blur on them, you know, random stuff like that. I would probably, you know, take all of this stuff that we've messed with. I would throw that into a folder. You know, just type in here like overlays or something. Drag it down below my, maybe below my colors here. Yeah, let's do that. So now they're kind of affected by that color as well. So, you know, that adds that. You know, that's what it originally looked like, and then we added some stuff to it, and now it's kind of cool looking. So, yeah, I'd say that's a good little exercise to kind of take a basic stock photo and add some cool lighting and things to it. There's obviously tons of stuff we could do, and the possibilities are endless. But yeah, hopefully that helps. I think that covers this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching and sitting through it. Hopefully you learned something, and I look forward to the next one. All right, bye.